A couple finds themselves caught in a web of a detective turned insurance adjuster who will do anything to uncover the secrets they've been keeping from Manitoba Public Insurance and from each other. And this is the premise behind Third Party, the latest collaboration from playwright Thomas McLeod and director Teresa Thomson of Brighter Dark Theatre for the Winnipeg Fringe Festival. Their previous collaborations have been met with sold-out runs, and now they're turning their insurance escapades into stage shenanigans. Teresa and Thomas join us here on Classic 107 today. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Maybe I'll start with you here, Thomas. What inspired Brighter Dark Theatre taking on Big Insurance?
Big Insurance. The the public option, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had one or two run-ins with, insurance sort of claims, having to manage that, and it really lays bare certain elements of your relationships if it's like a car crash or something, or like suddenly when insurance is involved, you're like, what is the nature of our relationship, and how do I describe that to the state,
Oh, interesting how that helps to maybe DTR in a bit more of a formal sort of a way that you have to then explain when there's property or finances involved. Maybe Teresa, you can talk a bit about how the decision came to be between the two of you to say, you know what, we need to turn these experiences, this sort of impersonalization of relationships into a piece of theater.
Well, that was all Thomas. I think I got to see a first draft December, I want to say, something like that, under a totally different title. But the bones of it was a different script, and it sort of got down to the bones of it, and then that's we got it pretty tight, and that's the script that we're bringing now. So, but when I read it, it was the relationships and the way they play out is and kind of this and the characters that he wrote, really beautiful, really universal, and it's so funny. It's a comedy style that speaks to my heart, and it is super dark, which also speaks to my heart very much. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's based on the conversations that you and I have had over the last several months, Teresa, it seems like that would be something that has a certain attraction. Thomas, you were talking before about that sort of impersonalization of the relationships that you have to then delve into when you're dealing with insurance and property and money. How does that sort of a relationship translate when you are writing fully fledged characters for the stage?
Yeah, I mean, it was, well, first of all, it started off as just a transcript of an argument that I had with a partner like 3 years ago. And it bears no resemblance to that initial transcript now, because I realized that these characters have to have flaws and upsides and everything, and instead of, look how right I was, and sometimes people will just put their personal arguments on stage and be like, I win, but that's the emotional sort of core of the show, is just like people who care about each other but have to flatten that out for practical reasons. And then I wrote a character because I had a very lovely experience with an adjuster in an insurance company, and I was like, well, what if this person was maybe more maliciously motivated? What if this person had sort of more of a hard-boiled detective kind of facade and a dark underpinning motivation? And that character just, boom, basically one day I wrote that whole first script, and took a year to like really get it into Teresa's hands. But yeah, it just, and you have to turn it into a comedy because you don't want to see people like arguing on stage for 45 minutes. And there's a little bit of that, but it's broken up by interesting bits.
So you talk about that argument that you started with as like a source material here, Thomas. Again, something that's very personal and very like it's a private moment that is now taking the stage in an entirely different form. What's it like to maybe not impersonalize, but you're taking this very real experience that happened to you and then saying, okay, now we've got to flatten this out to these sort of conversations about dollars and cents and potentially damages and things like that. What's that like to see and write about your own life through that kind of a lens where you're, as you say, flattening everything out?
Yeah, well, it's totally fictionalized now. There's like 6 or 7 lines that have stayed from the first draft, including the emotional heart of the play, which is he says to her, I'll just pay the difference in your premiums until they go down. And she says, what, in 10 years? We're not going to be together in 10 years. And it's like that, so it's all out in the open, right? But it's been totally fictionalized since then. And the person that I had that conversation with like 3 years ago, we're like very good friends now, and they've read many drafts of the script, and they're a very big fan of the show. So it's, I like to think that it's been a pretty fair representation of just like a tough human moment converted into something maybe a little bit more valuable and productive. And yeah, they're still my biggest supporter, honestly. So it's been really great that people have responded to it, because you have to have relatable, universal moments in a sort of, even in something that's like a dark comedy. It has to have like a reprieve.
Sure. Teresa, what's it like to take those sorts of moments that Thomas is just describing, theater out of the sort of everyday life, and then make it into something that is going to keep people hooked? Because on the page, like if we're talking about just a very sort of, we're talking about insurance, perhaps that's not so far removed from the ordinary that people might want to maybe say, you know what, I've gone through the insurance thing, I don't need to see it on stage again. What's it like to bring out that experience into a piece of theater that will become another success for Brighter Dark Theater?
Yeah, I think I can borderline guarantee nobody has experienced what the characters in the show has. At least I really hope not. I'm a huge fan of Thomas's writing. Huge. The way the characters are written, they're so. You always want to ground high comedy or high drama, but there needs to be an honesty to the characters, and he writes with a foundation for every human I've ever seen him put on stage. The comedy makes sense psychologically. Those characters make sense. It's a really rich dialogue that I get to work with. It's really well done, and there's a voice and a timing and a pace that makes a lot of sense. The other thing is these folks are, there's a lot of phone calls. And I'm fascinated by what people do when they're talking on the phone and they're not paying attention to, their face or the body. So the things that I would be doing right now, knowing that this is recorded and you can see my face, I'd be doing something entirely different if we were just on the phone, wandering around my place or dealing with whatever. That is rife for comedic opportunity. So I'm always interested in finding really truthful moments that people don't mean to display. Right? Like you can watch a couple silently and you can get a really good idea of like what that relationship is without hear them talk, right? So
yeah, it's interesting to hear you. Totally, it's interesting to hear you talk about those phone call moments, and I'm sure as we're talking, people are thinking about pacing around the kitchen floor, getting put on hold, then having to speak to an adjuster and saying, no, don't transfer me. I need to. I've already talked to that person. What's going on? The handling the bureaucracy while also not being witnessed handling the bureaucracy on the phone, as you say, not being necessarily able to, not having people interact with your face or those sort of nonverbal forms of communication. What's that like as a director to then approach those kinds of moments where there is this, you're not being, where a character is not being watched, and how do you direct moments of not being watched?
It's so fun. It is so fun. And really exploring it in rehearsals. We haven't been rehearsing for months. Instead, we've just gone really hard and every day for a few weeks, which has been awesome. But I mean, the entire cast, Thomas included, and Alana McPherson and Dane Bjornson, gifts to work with. And that involves taking the scene and separating them and doing it on the phone. That can involve all sorts of stuff. It means that you start paying attention to yourself when you're on the phone, and what are you doing, or what do you do when you think people aren't watching, or so there's a lot of observation. I also did some accidental research by getting into a major car accident on the highway at the end of March, where my car was totaled, which meant I had a month of working with all sorts of folks from MPI who were nothing like our show at all.
Yeah.
Thank
Super
God.
lovely people.
They were great. But you sort of have that lens outside of yourself. When am I taking notes? When am I like fussing with my nails? When am I doing whatever else? And what would these things say about me? It's when you think people aren't watching is I think when sometimes you're the most honest.
What do you think this show would look like, Teresa, if you hadn't have had that very accidental sort of immersion into the world? And how do you think the show would have been shaped differently had you not been in that car accident?
Great question. I having the not trepidation, but well, maybe that is the right word. Dealing with, okay, this person's going to call me and we're going to talk about like, what money am I getting back and whatever. And I was 100% at fault. And I had to have it explained to me by multiple people at MPI that I would be getting money back because of no fault insurance. And I was trying to explain to them, no, I'm 100% at fault. And this went back and forth, like just the absurdity of I felt so bad and I was prepared for somebody to be angry. And it's like, because I'm so sorry, MPI, that I did this, and and they're trying to help me. And I was like, no, I don't deserve help because it was my fault. It was like, if I put those conversations, and I'm not a writer, but if I put those on paper, they're absurd and funny. Looking through, it's that balance of the truth that the comedy comes from, and the absurdity, and certainly the dynamic. I was very fortunate that MPI seems to have wonderful people to deal with, and they were all lovely to me. Again, it's that it's the extra element that Thomas was talking about of what if the adjuster's intentions were different. So it's nice that I was able to experience the truth, and then how do we observe it from a different corner?
Sure. Easier to fuel that other corner when you know what's on the other side of that coin, so to speak.
Yes.
Thomas, what do you hope audiences take away from having seen Third Party, and not just here in Winnipeg, because I understand it's going to a couple of other locations as well?
Yeah, we're going to be in Edmonton and Vancouver for the Fringe Festivals out there as well. Little tour, little Western Canada tour. Yeah, I think a lot of things. I think like first off, gratitude for anytime you get a customer service person who is like just trying their best to help you out, and like not making their day harder and not making your day harder. Um, and I think just like the main problem these two people have in their relationship is honesty. Like, just like they're just beating around the bush and using this whole incident to replace actual genuine honesty and kindness with each other, where they're like, um, I think I would love for people to just the takeaway is that you should be grateful for the person you have in your life, and communicate with them as best you know how, without using a bunch of external excuses for why you feel a certain way about something.
Sure.
And that's pretty vague, I guess, but it's I don't want to give too much away.
No, indeed. We don't want to give anybody too much away here. They got to come see the show, which is the whole.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. It's being presented on the main stage at Manitoba Theatre for young people at the start of the Fringe, running all the way through. You can find all the information up at our website this morning, classic107.com, and on the Classic 107 app. Thomas McLeod and Teresa Thomson, all the best for the run of Third Party here in Winnipeg and beyond.
Thanks so much, Nolan.
Thanks, Nolan.